My name is Christina Langton, and I'm a graduate student at Morningside University and a 9th and 10th grade language arts teacher at a large urban high school in the state of Iowa. And the title of my research project was The Effects of Background Music Style on Correct Word Sequence. Because of the large student populations who are now allowed to bring headphones with personal music devices into the classroom, the need for understanding the impact of music choice on classroom performance is great. So the purpose of this study then is to determine how the style of music that a student is listening to, either with lyrics or without lyrics, will impact their writing ability. When I first began this research study, I was working for an inpatient mental health treatment facility as a general education middle school and high school teacher. Our students were all seen by counselors and therapists, and they all had a therapeutic plan which included approved classroom coping strategies. The therapists we used tended to put personal music devices as a regular coping strategy on these plans, so students would wear their headphones during independent work time to avoid distraction and improve concentration, and many had free choice of what type of music was put on their devices. I was skeptical that they were producing the same quality of work with music blasting in their ears as without, though I did see a need for the isolation that headphones brought in order to maintain a calm work environment. That brings me to my research. So driving in your car, shopping at the grocery store, riding in an elevator, waiting in the lobby at the doctor's office, these all have something in common. Background music is present in every one of these situations. It has become a common occurrence in society, and students are no exception. Today's students, more than ever before, are in a constant state of cognitive multitasking due to digital technology at their fingertips. In 2006, Rideout for Roberts and the Kaiser family put out a survey called Generation M, Media in the Lives of 8 to 18-year-olds, and it was one of the largest surveys ever conducted on media use among American youth. It had over 2,000 participants. The study concluded that 43% of students reported that they listened to music while using or participating in another medium most of the time, and another 30% of students do it some of the time. That is 73% of all students surveyed that listen to music while they do other activities. In another study, 1996, Benjits, Koolstra, and Vanderwort, 80% of students said they regularly listen to the radio while doing their homework. So let's look at some studies on multitasking while specifically working on homework. In 2002, Poole wrote The Distraction Effects of Background Television on Homework Performance. This study required students to work on comprehension activities while listening to background noise, not specifically music. The first of the experimental groups had a soap opera in the background in their native language. The second group had videos, foreign language music videos, and the third group was the control, and they had no background noise. Students listening to the soap opera did worse on their homework than either of the other groups, and it was concluded that the brain was, even if subconsciously, listening to and processing the English language that it could comprehend. In 1989, Salme and Badley wrote The Effects of Background Music on Phonological Short-Term Memory. This study required students to work on recall-type activities. Research participants listened to both music with lyrics and music without lyrics while attempting to memorize and then recall a series of 9 numbers. Findings concluded that speech itself is more distracting than music alone. And this also confirms the findings of Poole, as we stated before, that if the brain can comprehend, what's being said, there is an increased level of distractibility, leaving less attention to be distributed to, say, homework. This brings us to some theories. Kahneman's 1973 theory of the capacity model of attention. This theorizes that a person only has so much attention that can be distributed at any given time. If a person's overall possible attention is deferred to one source, like the soap opera with speech, there would be less attention left for a second source, like the homework as demonstrated. But this requires a biological stimulus. In 2000, Perry did research on traumatized children and how trauma influences brain development. It studied children who were exposed to trauma, and it reported that any patterned, repetitive stimulation, not just trauma, can change brain function. Another study out of the neuroscience program at Stanford University in 2003 followed a small animal called a chitlid that is found in lakes. And these animals underwent behavioral changes. They became more territorial to ensure survival. But these behavioral changes also resulted in a cellular change in the animal's brain. Research concluded that not only brain function changes through repetitive behavior, but the structure of the brain is altered, leading to changes that can last a lifetime. Therefore, the repetitive function of listening to music while multitasking could result in the restructuring of the brain that will require music in order to perform this function. This could explain why so many students claim to need their music devices in order to focus. So should teachers allow students to use their devices in the classroom? Research has shown that listening to background noise with comprehensible language can be a hindrance to schoolwork. However, listening to instrumental music can improve scores both on comprehension and recall type assignments. This improvement may be caused by a biological restructuring of the mind due to frequent multitasking in which the student listens to music constantly while doing their homework. The purpose of this study was to fill in a gap in the research. While the addition of music has made a positive impact to comprehension and recall, limited research is available to show music's impact on a student's ability to improve lengthy writing assignments, which is important in my writing classes. Therefore, my hypothesis is students would score higher on assessed writing while listening to music without lyrics than while listening to music with lyrics. To test this hypothesis, students will participate in a timed writing probe standardized by curriculum-based measurement. I'll call that CBM, and will be scored using a method called correct word sequence that counts each word written and reduces the score by errors in spelling, grammar, and punctuation. The experimental group will do this while first listening to music without lyrics, instrumental music, and then to music with lyrics. All the while, the control group will do their probes in silence with no music. The results of this study can be used to help teachers make instructional decisions about whether they should allow personal music players in their classroom based on potential positive or negative impact to a student's work performance. So there were 30 10th grade students that were used in this research, no special education students. They came from varying SES and racial backgrounds, though predominantly they were white or Caucasian. 15 students from each of two classes, one class being the experimental group and the other being control group. The study began by giving students a survey asking if they preferred to do their work while listening to music, and this was necessary for two reasons. First, will students choose to put their earphones in? If they don't, the implications of this study are irrelevant to that student. And secondly, if they do choose to put their earphones in, do they use their earphones regularly enough to have established a change in brain functioning, as shown in the previous research? So after eliminating students who would not use background music during the study and special education students, 15 students were then randomly selected from each class. CBM writing probes, which is a worksheet that was printed off, one for each student on plain white computer paper, using the online probe generator that can be found at interventioncentral.org. We also needed pens and pencils, student's choice, and an online stopwatch set to 3 minutes. Music needed to be played over the classroom speakers. This experiment used the Promethean board and accompanying speakers. Both instrumental music and pop music with lyrics that the majority of students would recognize were used. For this experiment, I used Pandora.com radio stations entitled Today's Hits, which was the contemporary music, and Beats for Studying, which is similar song as the contemporary music, but all instrumental with no lyrics. The procedure for administering the probe included, first you gave 1 3-minute probe every week for 8 weeks. You read the probe out loud and do a 1-minute brainstorm. Then you reread the probe aloud and start your 3-minute timer in which your students write. When the time is over, students set down their pencils and they pass in their papers. Remember, the control group was writing in silence. The experimental group wrote while listening to music. On odd weeks, 1, 3, 5, and 7, they listened to music with lyrics, and on even weeks, 2, 4, 6, and 8, they listened to music without lyrics. Probes were assessed by a teacher trained in CBM standardized scoring every week, and individual students' results were recorded in an Excel spreadsheet. Data will be analyzed at the conclusion of the entire 8-week experiment using the JASP Statistical Analysis Program. The hypothesis that predicted that participants in the experimental group would score higher on CBM writing probes while listening to music without lyrics than while listening to the music with lyrics was in fact not supported. On odd weeks during the music with lyrics condition, the experimental group had a mean of 78.43, and on even weeks without lyrics, 78.07. T-test results show students in the experimental group scored higher while listening to music with lyrics, though the increase was not statistically significant. If we look at the control versus the experimental group over the entire 8-week period and across all experimental conditions, the experimental group had a mean of 78.25, while the control group only had a mean of 73.08. While student probe results were higher while listening to music both with and without lyrics than the control group scores while taking the assessment in silence, there was no statistically significant difference found between the control and the experimental group. This research was not conclusive in showing that listening to music made an impact, either positive or negative, on students' writing scores. For students who are accustomed to listening to music while studying, there was little change in their writing performance when changing the independent variable between music with and without lyrics. If anything, this research supported the theory that students can change their brains by repetitively listening to music. Therefore, listening to music while taking this assessment showed no impact. This research could be used to support students using their personal music devices while doing schoolwork, specifically writing tasks in the classroom. Although it's not the solution I wanted to hear, it may make an impact on my classroom policies in the future. This study did have limitations. The sample size, only 30 students were used. Additional classes would yield additional research data. Only general education learners were studied. Students receiving special education services were not included. The additional research was brought on by a classroom of students who were all eligible for special education and who regularly used personal music devices in the classroom. Therefore, this study may not be representative of the population for which the results would apply. So in future research, I would suggest a larger group of participants and the inclusion of students both with and without an IEP, which would allow for a more accurate representation of the population. The length of time was too short. The first few weeks, students may have been familiarizing themselves with a standardized method of assessment, and that may have had an impact on the overall data. To make this experiment more consistent, it is suggested that the experiment take place over a longer period of time, perhaps even an entire school year. But even more importantly, allowing a few weeks of integration to learn the standardized testing format and scoring process prior to collecting the data would ensure better consistency of assessment results. Students could recognize the instrumental music because of the pop genre that I selected off of Pandora. And this may have led to a stronger distraction from the students than was initially anticipated, because possibly their brains could fill in the words since they knew the songs. Therefore, the use of unidentifiable instrumental music might help eliminate potential discrepancies in data, and this is another suggestion I am making for future research. It's also suggested that future researchers look at the analytical writing as well as the creative writing that this experiment focused on. In conclusion, the results of this study showed no statistically significant difference in the CBM writing scores between students who listened to music while studying and those who did not listen to music. It also showed no difference between the weeks that students listened to music with lyrics and the weeks they listened to music without lyrics. Overall, it is possible that listening to background music while writing may not have an impact on student performance. More research should be conducted in this area to confirm these findings. Thank you.